Yeah, boy.
As a big fan of open world games, I thought I would give Forspoken a try. People have been reviewing this game for a bit now, and none of the videos I checked out were particularly fond of the game. But wow, is this so much worse than I ever imagined. The first 2.5 hours are absolutely brutal, boring, cringy, slow, and completely pointless.
My favorite kicks. I could stare at you guys all day.
The sad thing is, after this point, I got into the combat and was really enjoying myself. It's not particularly complex or anything, but it was fun throwing rocks at soldiers acting like an earthbender. But everything else besides the combat is terrible. It really weighs down the game, and I can't see most people getting past the intro. I really love open world games with vast and beautiful worlds to explore, so my interest was piqued when I saw some of the enemies and towns in this one. But trust me, this is not a game you should play, and definitely not one made for most gamers. To start off, we're introduced to Frey, and you can forget about that name and just call her Loser because we're constantly reminded about how her life sucks and she's just a nobody.
I was going to say you have so much anger and resentment in you, I'm not sure you'll ever amount to anything at all.
Which makes no sense already. Wouldn't you try and make us like the main character? Give her a few scenes where we see real emotions about connections in her life? But no, we find out she's a criminal associated with a bad crowd. A woman judge lets her get away from prison because she feels bad for her.
But, in the holiday spirit, I'm going to give you an early present.
Get used to this, by the way. Forspoken is basically a game entirely made up of women. Loser gets saved by a judge, and later saved by a woman healer, and then gets help from a little girl after that. There are men in the story, yes, but not nearly as much as the ladies. I have no issue playing a really cool female, but none of these characters are likable, and especially not our Loser. The main character cries twice before you even get to play the game. She's constantly whining about how her life is awful, and she wishes her parents hadn't left her as a baby. This is a full-grown woman we're talking about who's constantly complaining about having it rough. It's very unrelatable. After meeting the cat, which is the best part of the game, Loser does nothing while saying she's going to leave town. Suddenly, she finds a cuff that latches onto her arm and she is whisked away into a magical portal. Our Loser is teleported to a land called Athia, where the break is destroying life and eating away at the world. This world looks fantastic. Cool mountainous structures and loads of colors decorating the area. But then we're forced to stare at it for 10 minutes straight while talking to our new cuff, unable to move. Which is thankfully skippable, but still awful. You're slowly introduced to the combat, and it's really bad at first, but like I said earlier, it's fun once you get into it. Unfortunately, our Loser here is from recent times. She's constantly cussing for no reason at all. It's very clear that the writers made her cuss constantly to show you how different she is from the world around her, but it's completely unnecessary. I don't need to hear the F word over and over while trying to slay monsters. I know a lot of games have cussing in them, and it's not that big of a deal in our society, but this just seems really out of place and unnecessary. Pretty soon you fight a dragon and it's fun. He doesn't take much damage, but dodging his attacks feels nice, and you get your standard healing system most games use nowadays. But now we get to the worst part of the game. The next hour almost is a huge walking cutscene. Our Loser gets put on trial once again, thrown in jail, and rescued by a woman who is important later. You're forced to slowly follow her around the guards, trying to not get caught, and it's agonizing. This whole time, our Loser main character is complaining about wanting to go home. She just wants to leave here, find her way back. But the entire introduction told us she's a loser with nothing, and all she wants is to get away and start a new life.
Finally, I can start over. Took long enough, though.
Corrupted by the break.
well, Break Bob here is the best shot I got at leaving, so...
This is it. She's in her new life that was gifted to her out of the millions of people who could have found that cuff. But no, she just misses her home that she hates and doesn't want anything to do with the people clearly helping her out.
Well, thanks for the jailbreak lady and the apple, but this is where we part ways.
This cuff she has a personality of its own and can speak to her, which is kind of cool. But all she does is cuss at it and tell it to shut up. She's such an unlikable protagonist. I feel like the story's so poorly written around this gangster wannabe who acts tough but cries as soon as we meet her. It's impossible to feel bad for her because we don't see her go through anything awful. She's just a crook who gets lucky enough to end up in a magical land, but then doesn't care. And again, the combat is fun. Right after this massive gameplay cutscene, you get to fight a few enemies and come across a deer clearly meant as a later boss. You deal hardly any damage at all, and the cuff itself tells you to run. But I fought it a few times anyway, because it was the first time I was allowed to explore and have fun in my new open world game. There's also these underground places called locked labyrinths. Now, these consist of a few rooms full of enemies with a boss at the end. At least this one did. I wasn't a fan of this particular boss, but it was a cool monster fight and I was playing the game, so it was fun. As you get a few more upgrades for your spells, the combat becomes pretty enjoyable. I really hated the early game because your pebbles don't really seem to do anything at all, and it's combat where you run away, throw rocks, run away, throw rocks. But eventually, I ended up in a boss fight where I had massive boulders to chuck and timed dodges, which grant you some counter damage of a sort.
You're mine!
This boss fight was a major highlight, as it took a bit of effort and made me feel more powerful. It's just pretty sad because this combat could have made a great game. There's something hidden underneath, and I imagine you get cool spells later on that feel more powerful and unique. I just don't know if this story is worth going through to get to that point. Our loser is so unlikable and completely unrelatable. I wasn't even going to play Forspoken originally because people didn't make it out to sound good at all. It was going to be a generic, open world with wasted time and mediocre gameplay. But I actually disagree. I think the gameplay is interesting. Honestly, quite fun at times. But you don't get to play the game. The story's way too long, full of cutting to and from the player that gets extremely annoying.
Hey, Cuff. Can you read what it says here?
How can you not read their language when you can understand their words?
Beats me. You're Mr. Languages share commonalities across many dimensions.
End of the story. Don't buy or play Forspoken. I don't know who this was made for, but the way they created this story, it's not something most RPG fans are gonna love. Just go play Elden Ring instead. That game has hardly any cutscenes at all, and your character's extremely relatable because it's you. If you have Elden Ring, then you're completely wasting your time even looking at this game. I really wish it wasn't as padded out as it is, but it's too much to be a good game. Thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you got something out of this video. I thought I'd give this game a shot, and it just wasn't really for me. Feel free to let me know what you thought from the footage, and I'll catch you next time.